In the tumultuous arena of American politics, where every utterance is scrutinized and every action weaponized, the spectacle of a high-profile deposition can often eclipse the very legal proceedings it purports to serve. When the name Bill Clinton is invoked, especially in conjunction with the enduring, sordid shadow of Jeffrey Epstein, the stage is set for a political drama of unparalleled intensity. The recent appearance of former President Bill Clinton before the House Oversight Committee, ostensibly to shed light on his past association with the disgraced financier, was precisely such a moment. A convergence of legal obligation and political theater, anticipated with bated breath by pundits and partisans alike. The Epstein scandal, a dark stain on the fabric of American society, continues to cast a long and unsettling shadow, ensnaring numerous prominent figures in its wake. Its enduring impact has fueled relentless public and political pressure, demanding accountability from all those, including former President Donald Trump, whose names have surfaced in connection with Epstein's illicit network. Clinton's deposition was framed by many as a crucial juncture, a moment that promised to either clarify or further complicate the intricate web of relationships surrounding Epstein. Leading up to this highly anticipated event, the prevailing narrative, particularly within conservative media and among Trump's allies, was one of triumphant expectation. The deposition was widely portrayed as a potential political coup, a damaging blow to Clinton's legacy and, by extension, to the Democratic Party. There was a palpable sense that this testimony would not only expose alleged Democratic hypocrisy, but also, crucially, serve to exonerate Donald Trump from his own uncomfortable links to Epstein. The anticipation was that Clinton, under oath, would be forced to make admissions that would definitively shift public scrutiny away from Trump and firmly onto his long-standing political rival. However, as the dust began to settle and the initial, carefully curated narrative started to unravel, a different picture emerged. What was intended as a political ambush, a calculated maneuver to implicate Clinton and deflect from Trump, inadvertently exposed critical inconsistencies in Trump's own public narrative. Far from being a political victory for Trump's allies, Clinton's testimony, when viewed through a more objective lens and juxtaposed with subsequent revelations, effectively turned the tables on his political adversaries. This script will delve into how Clinton's deposition, rather than confirming the preconceived notions of his detractors, instead raised further, more pointed questions about Donald Trump's association with Jeffrey Epstein, ultimately backfiring on those who sought to weaponize it for their own political gain, allowing Clinton to strike back in an unexpected turn of events. The strategy employed by the Republican-led House Oversight Committee in orchestrating Bill Clinton's deposition was a masterclass in political stage management, designed to maximize narrative control and public impact. The decision to conduct the deposition behind closed doors, away from the prying eyes of the public and the immediate scrutiny of the press, was a crucial first step. This secrecy, while ostensibly justified on procedural grounds, served a far more strategic purpose. It created an information vacuum, allowing the committee's Republican members to emerge as the sole arbiters of what had transpired within the deposition room. By controlling the initial flow of information, they could frame the narrative in a way that was most advantageous to their political objectives, ensuring that their interpretation of events would dominate the news cycle long before any countervailing evidence or alternative perspectives could gain traction. The primary goal of this carefully orchestrated event was twofold: to implicate Bill Clinton in the Epstein scandal, thereby tarnishing his reputation, and by extension, that of the Democratic Party, and to deflect the growing scrutiny of Donald Trump's own well-documented connections to Epstein. The underlying aim was to weaponize Clinton's past association with the disgraced financier, transforming it into a political spectacle that would resonate with their base and create a powerful contrast with their portrayal of Trump as a victim of a politically motivated witch hunt. The pre-deposition rhetoric from Trump and his allies was a key component of this strategy, a relentless barrage of accusations and innuendo designed to prime the public for a damning revelation. They repeatedly sought to link Clinton more deeply to Epstein's heinous crimes, framing the deposition as a pivotal moment in uncovering a vast, Democratic-led conspiracy of silence and complicity. The immediate aftermath of the deposition saw this strategy culminate in a single explosive claim. Emerging from the closed-door session, Congressman James Comer, the chairman of the committee, made a bold and unequivocal declaration. Bill Clinton, he announced, had exonerated Donald Trump. This statement, delivered with an air of triumphant finality, was the linchpin of the entire Republican narrative. It was a simple, powerful, an easily digestible soundbite, perfectly crafted for the rapid-fire dissemination of modern media. The conservative media echo chamber immediately sprang into action, amplifying Comer's statement across a vast network of television channels, radio shows, and online platforms. It was presented not as an interpretation, but as an undeniable fact, a major political victory that had decisively shifted the landscape of the Epstein scandal. The irony of this maneuver was not lost on seasoned political observers. Republicans, who had for decades built a political brand on relentless criticism of Bill Clinton, were now, in a stunning display of political expediency, holding him up as a credible character reference for Donald Trump. This sudden and dramatic reversal underscored the desperation to control the narrative, a willingness to temporarily align with a long-standing political adversary if it meant shielding their own standard-bearer from scrutiny. The message was clear. If even Bill Clinton, a Democrat and a figure of long-standing Republican ire, could vouch for Trump's innocence, then surely all other accusations must be baseless. This, they hoped, would be the final word on the matter, a political checkmate that would silence all further questions about Trump's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. What the Republican strategists had envisioned as a controlled demolition of Bill Clinton's credibility and a simultaneous exoneration of Donald Trump began to unravel almost immediately upon the public release of fragments of Clinton's testimony and the subsequent responses from Democratic members of the committee. The meticulously crafted narrative of Trump's vindication quickly collided with the nuanced reality of Clinton's statements, revealing a stark contrast between expectation and outcome. Far from being a compliant witness who would inadvertently bolster Trump's defense, Clinton, through his carefully worded responses and a powerful opening statement, subtly but effectively turned the tables. Clinton's opening statement was a masterclass in political communication, setting a tone that was both conciliatory and subtly defiant. He articulated two primary reasons for his appearance: his profound love for his country and his unwavering belief in the principle that no person is above the law, even presidents, especially presidents. This immediately framed his presence not as an admission of guilt or complicity, but as an act of civic duty, a commitment to the foundational ideals of American democracy. He spoke of the need to move a little further away from the brink of partisan division, urging a return to a political discourse where the search for truth and justice outweighs the partisan urge to score points and create spectacle. This was a direct, albeit veiled, rebuke to the very nature of the hearing, implicitly criticizing the committee's perceived political motivations. Crucially, he also emphasized his desire for justice and healing for Epstein's victims, positioning himself on the side of those wronged rather than those who might have enabled the wrongdoing. The pivotal moment, the true turning point that began to dismantle the Republican narrative, centered on Clinton's account of the falling out between Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein. Trump had consistently maintained that his relationship with Epstein ended abruptly and decisively when he discovered Epstein's heinous criminal activities, portraying himself as a moral crusader who severed ties due to outrage over child sex trafficking. This narrative was central to his defense against any lingering associations with the disgraced financier. However, Clinton's testimony offered a dramatically different explanation. Under oath, Clinton stated that Trump had told him their falling out was not due to moral indignation, but rather a mundane, transactional dispute over a real estate deal. This revelation was a direct and devastating contradiction of Trump's long-standing public narrative. It stripped away the veneer of moral righteousness that Trump had carefully constructed around his disengagement from Epstein, exposing it as potentially a fabrication designed to sanitize his past. The implications for Trump's credibility were immediate and profound, suggesting that his public statements regarding Epstein were, at best, misleading, and at worst, outright dishonest. This single point of testimony, seemingly innocuous in its delivery, served to undermine a cornerstone of Trump's defense and shifted the focus back onto the nature of his own relationship with Epstein. Furthermore, Clinton steadfastly maintained his own ignorance regarding Epstein's criminal enterprise. He asserted that he had no idea of what crimes Epstein was committing, and emphatically stated that he saw nothing and did nothing wrong. He acknowledged his brief acquaintance with Epstein, which he noted ended years before his crimes came to light, and insisted that he never witnessed during our limited interactions any indication of what was truly going on. This denial, while anticipated by some, was crucial in preventing his testimony from being weaponized against him in the manner Republicans had hoped. He further bolstered this by referencing his own upbringing in a home with domestic abuse, stating that if he had any inkling of what he was doing, he would have turned him in myself and led the call for justice for his crimes, not sweetheart deals. This personal anecdote served to humanize him and reinforce his claim of innocence regarding Epstein's true nature. Another notable aspect of Clinton's testimony was his impassioned defense of his wife, Hillary Clinton, against what he perceived as politically motivated attempts to implicate her. He unequivocally stated that Hillary had nothing to do with Jeffrey Epstein and had no memory of even meeting him. He highlighted that she neither traveled with him nor visited any of his properties, lambasting the committee for subpoenaing her as simply not right. This segment of his testimony underscored the broader political nature of the inquiry, suggesting that the committee's reach extended beyond legitimate oversight into partisan attacks. Finally, Clinton's frequent use of phrases like, "I don't recall," or "I'm not going to say something I'm not sure of," became a point of contention for his detractors. While some interpreted this as evasiveness, it is a common and legally sound rhetorical strategy in depositions, particularly when dealing with events that transpired decades ago. Clinton himself addressed this, stating, "This was all a long time ago, and I'm bound by my oath not to speculate or to guess." He framed it as a commitment to truth under oath, prioritizing factual accuracy over speculative recollection. This approach, while potentially frustrating for those seeking definitive answers, emphasized his adherence to the legal process rather than engaging in conjecture. Implicit in his testimony, and later made explicit by his allies, was a demand for the full, unedited transcript and video of the deposition to be released. This call for transparency directly challenged the Republican strategy of selective leaks and narrative control, forcing the committee to either release the full context or face accusations of deliberate obfuscation. In essence, Clinton's testimony, rather than being the anticipated political liability, became a strategic counteroffensive, subtly but powerfully shifting the narrative and laying the groundwork for the backfire that was to come. The immediate aftermath of James Comer's pronouncement of Donald Trump's exoneration was met with a swift and coordinated counteroffensive from Democratic members of the House Oversight Committee. Recognizing the strategic importance of controlling the narrative, Democratic Congress members, including Representatives Frost, Garcia, and Stanberry, wasted no time in pushing back against the Republican framing. Their press conferences and public statements were not merely reactive. They were designed to systematically dismantle the carefully constructed Republican narrative and to reframe Clinton's testimony as a damning indictment of Trump's credibility. The core of the Democratic counter-narrative was the argument that Clinton's testimony did not, in fact, exonerate Trump, but rather raised more questions about the relationship between President Trump and Epstein. This was a crucial rhetorical pivot. Instead of directly refuting Comer's claim with a simple denial, Democrats shifted the focus, arguing that the deposition had merely exposed deeper inconsistencies and unanswered questions surrounding Trump's involvement. They highlighted the discrepancy between Trump's public statements about his break with Epstein, attributing it to moral outrage over Epstein's crimes, and Clinton's sworn testimony, which indicated a more prosaic, transactional dispute over a real estate deal. This direct contradiction, they argued, undermined Trump's entire narrative and suggested a deliberate attempt to mislead the public. However, the most explosive element of the Democratic counteroffensive came not from Clinton's testimony itself, but from external evidence that directly contradicted claims made by Trump and his allies. This came in the form of an email from federal prosecutors, a bombshell revelation that exposed the extent of Trump's travel on Jeffrey Epstein's private jet. This email, which surfaced in the public domain, explicitly stated that Trump had traveled on Epstein's private jet many more times than previously has been reported, and, crucially, including the period we would expect to charge in a Maxwell case. This was a direct and undeniable refutation of the narrative, often amplified by conservative media outlets like Fox News, that Trump was not on the plane or had only minimal contact with Epstein's illicit travel network. The significance of this evidence cannot be overstated. It moved the debate beyond a mere battle of interpretations and introduced concrete, verifiable facts that directly challenged the Republican narrative. The email served as irrefutable proof that the claims made by Trump's defenders, that he was never on Epstein's plane or that his contact was negligible, were demonstrably false. This revelation not only debunked a key component of the pro-Trump narrative, but also raised serious questions about the veracity of other statements made by Trump and his surrogates regarding his relationship with Epstein. Armed with this new evidence, Democrats intensified their calls for accountability, demanding that Donald Trump himself testify before the House Oversight Committee. This was a deliberate and strategic turning of the tables. Republicans had initiated the deposition of Bill Clinton, ostensibly to uncover truths about Epstein and to implicate a prominent Democrat. Now, with Clinton's testimony having inadvertently exposed inconsistencies in Trump's own story, and with the flight logs providing concrete evidence of his extensive travel with Epstein, Democrats argued that it was only fair and necessary for Trump to face similar scrutiny. Congressmember Garcia, for instance, publicly challenged Trump to man up and show up before the committee, directly mirroring the pressure that had been placed on Clinton. The argument was simple. If Republicans were genuinely interested in uncovering the truth about Epstein's network, then all individuals prominently featured in the Epstein files, regardless of their political affiliation, should be compelled to provide answers under oath. This demand for Trump's deposition highlighted the perceived hypocrisy of the Republican strategy. They had aggressively pursued Clinton's testimony, framing it as a vital step in a legitimate investigation, yet they simultaneously shielded Trump from similar demands. This partisan disparity underscored the political motivations behind the initial deposition, exposing it not as a genuine search for truth, but as a calculated attempt to weaponize an investigation for political gain. The Democratic counter-narrative, bolstered by Clinton's testimony and the damning flight log evidence, effectively shifted the focus back onto Donald Trump, transforming what was intended as a political liability for Democrats into a renewed call for accountability from the former president. The meticulously planned Republican strategy to weaponize Bill Clinton's deposition against the Democratic Party and simultaneously shield Donald Trump from further scrutiny began to spectacularly unravel almost as soon as the initial triumphant pronouncements were made. The very act designed to expose Clinton's vulnerabilities instead illuminated the glaring inconsistencies and potential fabrications within Trump's own narrative, turning the political weapon back on its wielder. Even before Clinton's testimony, there were subtle hints that Trump himself might have been apprehensive about the proceedings. His public comments, where he expressed a surprising sentiment of liking Bill Clinton and not wanting to see him deposed, could be interpreted not merely as a gesture of magnanimity, but as a veiled anxiety. Perhaps Trump, privy to the details of his own past conversations with Clinton, understood the potential for his carefully constructed narrative about Epstein to be challenged under oath. This pre-deposition rhetoric, initially dismissed as typical Trumpian bluster, gained new significance in the aftermath of Clinton's revelations. The core of the backfire lay in the direct contradiction between Clinton's sworn testimony and Trump's long-standing public explanation for his break with Jeffrey Epstein. Trump had consistently presented himself as a man of moral conviction, claiming he severed ties with Epstein out of disgust for his criminal activities. This moral outrage narrative was a crucial component of his self-portrayal, designed to distance him from the repugnant nature of Epstein's crimes. However, Clinton's testimony, stating that Trump had confided in him that the falling out was over a real estate deal, shattered this carefully cultivated image. The contrast between a principled stand against heinous crimes and a petty business dispute was stark and undeniable. This revelation not only undermined Trump's credibility, but also exposed the fragility of his narrative, suggesting that his public statements were, at best, a convenient revision of history, and at worst, a deliberate falsehood. The Republican strategy of conducting the deposition in secret, intended to control the flow of information and shape the narrative, also proved to be a critical miscalculation. By attempting to restrict access, they inadvertently fueled demands for full transparency. The repeated calls from Democrats and independent media outlets, such as the Midas Touch Network, for the complete, unedited release of the deposition video and transcript became a powerful counter-narrative. This pressure directly challenged the Republican committee's authority and integrity, forcing them into a defensive posture. The longer the full context remained hidden, the more credible the accusations of selective editing and narrative manipulation became. This demand for transparency effectively stripped the Republicans of their ability to unilaterally dictate the public's understanding of Clinton's testimony. The role of independent media in dissecting the official narrative was also instrumental in the backfire. Outlets like the Midas Touch Network did not simply accept the Republican pronouncements at face value. They meticulously analyzed the available information, highlighted the discrepancies, and, crucially, brought to light alternative evidence, such as the federal prosecutor's email regarding Trump's extensive travel on Epstein's private jet. This independent scrutiny provided a vital check on the dominant narrative, offering the public a more complete and often contradictory picture of events. It demonstrated how, in an age of polarized media, a determined effort to uncover and disseminate facts can effectively challenge even the most well-orchestrated political messaging. Ultimately, the public perception began to shift. What was initially presented as a Republican victory, the supposed exoneration of Trump by Clinton, quickly crumbled under the weight of scrutiny and contradictory evidence. The attempt to weaponize Clinton's past association with Epstein had not only failed to achieve its intended goal, but had inadvertently shone a brighter, more uncomfortable light on Donald Trump's own connections to the disgraced financier. The backfire was complete. The political maneuver designed to bury questions about Trump had instead resurrected them with renewed vigor, leaving his allies scrambling to contain the damage and defend a narrative that was increasingly difficult to sustain. The saga surrounding Bill Clinton's deposition and its subsequent political fallout serves as a potent microcosm of the current state of American politics, where the lines between legitimate oversight and partisan warfare have become increasingly blurred. This event was not merely a legal proceeding. It was a carefully choreographed political maneuver, designed to achieve specific partisan objectives rather than a disinterested pursuit of truth. The weaponization of congressional investigations, transforming them into arenas for political combat rather than genuine accountability, has become an alarming trend. The Clinton deposition, initiated by a Republican-led committee with clear political aims, stands as a prime example of this phenomenon, where the process itself becomes a tool for narrative control and opponent discreditation. At the heart of this political theater lies the relentless battle for narrative control. In an era dominated by rapid information dissemination, social media echo chambers, and deeply entrenched partisan divides, the ability to shape and control the public narrative is paramount. The Epstein scandal, with its high-profile figures and morally repugnant undertones, provides fertile ground for such battles. Both sides of the political spectrum understand that public perception, often more than factual accuracy, dictates political fortunes. The initial Republican push to frame Clinton's testimony as an exoneration of Trump was a calculated attempt to seize this narrative, to define the terms of the debate before a more complete picture could emerge. However, the swift and effective counter-narrative from Democrats, bolstered by independent media, demonstrated the inherent fragility of such attempts when confronted with inconvenient truths. It is crucial, amidst the political machinations, to never lose sight of the enduring shadow of Jeffrey Epstein. Regardless of the political affiliations of those entangled in his web, the core issue remains the horrific crimes he committed and the profound suffering he inflicted upon countless victims. The partisan squabbles and the jockeying for political advantage, while perhaps inevitable in a polarized environment, often overshadow this fundamental truth. The focus should always return to the victims, to the pursuit of justice for them, and to understanding how such a monstrous enterprise was allowed to flourish for so long, seemingly protected by powerful individuals. This episode also underscores the critical and often challenging call for accountability. If the pursuit of justice is to be genuine, it must be applied equally, without regard for political stature or party affiliation. The demand for Donald Trump's testimony, particularly in light of the revelations from Clinton's deposition and the Epstein flight logs, is not merely a partisan retort. It is a legitimate extension of the principle that no one is above the law. If Republicans were sincere in their stated goal of uncovering the full truth about Epstein's network, then all individuals connected to him, especially those whose names appear repeatedly in his records, must be compelled to provide answers under oath. The selective application of scrutiny undermines the very notion of justice and reinforces public cynicism towards political institutions. The role of media in such a polarized landscape is more vital and more fraught than ever before. In an environment where deliberate attempts to mislead and misinform are commonplace, the responsibility of media outlets to present information fairly, accurately, and with critical analysis is paramount. The contrast between the immediate, uncritical amplification of James Comer's exoneration claim by certain media outlets and the meticulous evidence-based dissection offered by independent platforms like the Midas Touch Network is instructive. It highlights the divergence between media that serves as a partisan echo chamber and media that strives to hold power accountable, regardless of political stripe. The latter, through its commitment to investigative journalism and fact-checking, plays an indispensable role in safeguarding democratic discourse and enabling an informed citizenry. In conclusion, the attempt to weaponize Bill Clinton's deposition against his political adversaries ultimately backfired, revealing more about the accusers than the accused. What was intended as a political coup transformed into a moment of unintended exposure, highlighting the inconsistencies in Donald Trump's own narrative and intensifying the demand for his accountability. This incident serves as a powerful reminder of the resilience of truth, the importance of critical thinking in navigating a complex information landscape, and the ongoing, often arduous, fight against political manipulation. In this particular instance, the tables were indeed turned, and the political gambit, rather than achieving its intended aim, inadvertently shone a brighter, more uncomfortable light on the very individuals who sought to cast shadows elsewhere.